Ladies and gentlemen, I know we are the last section, so our panelists will have short answers, short sharing, but informative ones, so everyone can go to the bar on time. Okay, so this panel, and also there will be no question from the floor. If you want to ask questions, bring them to the bar, so they will share more than they are sharing here. Okay, this panel originally will consist of the BRIC countries, so we have, I can represent China, then India, Africa, and Latin America. Unfortunately, one friend from Alexandria from Russia cannot make it this time, so now it's the big country, not the BRICS country. Okay, so I won't introduce their background. They will do that when it's their turn to talk. So maybe I'll just kick off the panel by just setting the scene, talking a little bit about China, so then they can share the landscape or the situations in their respective markets. So maybe China, most probably, is always like have a dual role. It's also the second largest economy in the world, but people also regarding it as developing countries. But it's also representing like the top 5 countries in the whole world, like for inbound and outbound investment. So most probably, international brands are interested investing in China on like retail, properties, technology, and so on and so forth. But China also investing a lot, like mining and other heavy industries and IT technology, if those market allows them to do so. Maybe it's time for our panelists to talk about what happens in the country. So what's the trends and what the situation in, maybe started from Madan on India?
So I represent India, which arguably is the queen amongst the emerging markets. Given by the number of times India was mentioned today, only after the United States, and way ahead of China and by various panelists, and way ahead of Japan, and way ahead of Germany and UK. So India is something to be taken notice of. So when you go back and talk to your clients, tell them this thing. In terms of the subject of discussion, mergers and acquisitions and deals in the capital market, I think the last 2 or 3 years have been subdued. We have seen less deal activity, and inward deals from foreign countries have been less. But there is an increasing number of Indians going and buying out companies in Europe, in Latin America, in Australia, in various sectors. Take another indicator, which is initial public offerings, again, has been subdued. But we have had a very significant event in the country just about 5 or 6 months ago, which is a new government was elected to power. It was the largest ever election held anywhere in the world, absolutely smoothly. And the government that was voted to power was voted on the plank of good governance and development, and not on caste, religion, or anything else like earlier. This government promises a lot of hope and optimism, and the sentiment is at an all-time high. We think in the near future, capital market activity and business activity will pick up in good stead. And beyond the capital market, there are a number of other indicators that we must look at. India has, in the last 10 years, has had an average GDP growth of about 7%, 6.5%, some years 8-9%. I think the GDP growth will accelerate in the near future to 7-7.5% plus. And India is still very early in the economic development cycle, which typically should last about another 20 years. So it is the 10th largest economy today in absolute terms, but if you take the purchase power parity, it is the 3rd largest, only after US and China. And if this economic growth rate is maintained for a long time to come, as we expect it to be, it could be well one of the real large economies. Now, having said all this, India is a land of contradictions. It is said that whatever you can rightly say of India, the opposite is also true. So I'll give you a number of arguments, if you have time, to disprove any theory or prove any theory. So this is where I will leave it for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Madam. Maybe Kate, you can share more about Africa?
So, thank you. Six of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world right now, 6 of them are in Africa. I have a slide that I'm hoping someone can put up for me just to convey the sheer size of the continent, 53 countries. This is a very good indication of, as I said, the sheer size of the continent. This is where you've got a growing middle class, there's rapid rates of urbanization, economies are booming. Basically, if you're not in Africa right now as a corporate or a corporation, you're not in the global economy. This was obviously demonstrated recently by President Obama hosting the US-Africa Summit in DC. We were the only African bank invited to attend that session. There is huge emphasis from the global community on the investment needs in Africa and the opportunities that the continent represent. And just to give some context, in light of my fellow panelists, is that some of you may be aware of the heavy investment by China in Africa in building the much-needed infrastructure on the continent in exchange for access to the minerals and the energy resources. And American companies were much slower on the uptake. Chinese have been investing on the continent for at least 10 to 15 years. American companies weren't really in the game. But since the current Obama administration has shown the interest in the need to invest in Africa, and particularly his program called Power Africa, American companies have now entered onto the continent. And in contrast to their Chinese counterparts, they're a lot more agile in closing the deals, facilitating and structuring the finance, which we as a bank are able to, what we see and what we're able to facilitate. That just kind of gives you an overview of where the continent is, and the main requirement, or the main sectors are energy and infrastructure.
Okay, Jorge, how about Latin America?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Paul, for having underlined during your presentation the size of our network in Latin America. Very briefly, we have 10 own offices in 9 different countries, and within the next weeks, Paul, perhaps this is an announcement to share with all the group here. We are opening 2 new offices in 2 different countries in which we don't have presence now. So having that in mind as a background, I don't want this to become a sort of a beauty parade of emerging regions of the world competing for you opening up your pockets and investing on our regions. But you know, looking at the trends that are taking place in the Northern Hemisphere, where the US, perhaps not that badly now, and Europe becoming poorer and growing older, I think it's relevant that we bring to your attention that the future of the world perhaps is in what sometimes in a very patronizing way has been known as developing and emerging world. As for the case of Latin America, I'll summarize very briefly saying Latin America is still in. The virtuous cycle of Latin American growth is there to benefit from, and it will be for the next years to come. Average growth in 2014 will be 3% in terms of GDP. You have countries almost approaching double-digit GDP growth. Middle classes are growing dramatically. I mean, we're talking almost 100 million new middle class entrants over the past 10 years. And according to the experts, GDP for Latin America as a whole its potential has the potential to become almost 10% of the total GDP in the world. So having said that, it's important, and this I will underline, and I will conclude my opening remarks with this thought, that Latin America is no longer a foreign direct investment recipient, as it used to be in the past, but Latin America investors are becoming foreign direct investors of their own in regions outside Latin America. So I invite you to pay closer attention to future developments coming from Latin America. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe now we talk about a little bit about like challenges, difficulties when entering these markets. So in the case of China, I would say policies, government interference is the most crucial to the successful of international companies entering the market. I don't know whether you're aware of that or not. Like recently or in the past, like 18 months, 24 months, in fact, the government announced a few measures that impact on international brands entering into the market. For example, the government said government departments will not be allowed to purchase foreign brand cars. So in some of the car brands, they are facing a little bit difficulty because in the past, the government department could be one big customer, so easy. You talk to the government department, then they give you big orders. They even look into less smaller consumer products. For example, they also talked about government officials are not allowed to use like a foreign handphone. They particularly named like Samsung, Apple, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, I would say this is more like a protectionism to their own product, national product. So I don't know what happens to other markets. Are they welcoming like international brands entering into the market, or they also have certain measure on like protecting their own products? Maybe Madan, you first.
It is natural that all economies and all societies will have a certain degree of protectionism to protect theirs, particularly where sectors are vulnerable and not as competitive as most of the. I mean, in India, for example, retail. There has been such a long debate and discussion on allowing retail foreign direct investment into India, but every time these proposals have come up, there has been such a strong backlash of public opinion and local interests that the governments have had to withdraw those proposals. So these things have to be taken into reality. But I think to broad base the discussion, there are a lot of challenges that multinationals face. Some of them are external, some of them are within the control of the multinationals, but they simply don't seem to be learning the lessons as well as they should. The external factors are, of course, India is a very complicated place, and many a multinational corporation has been frustrated. Many have come and gone and come back again. To give you some indicators, though things are, the silver lining is things are changing fast, but indicators are we are 135th or 134th on the index of ease of doing business amongst 189 or 190 nations. In terms of starting a new business, it is 175th in the ease of starting a new business. Nearly 134th again on Transparency International's corruption index. So we are facing gigantic challenges, which also the multinationals who come to that country face. The other thing is the diversity of the country. I mean, there is no land on earth which is as diverse and as complex as India. We have newspapers published in 40 languages. So imagine the life of a public relations professional. 40 languages, we have 1,000 dialects, 28 states, 150 odd socio-cultural regions, though they may be part of a single political state, but they exhibit different characteristics. Now, dealing with this complexity is not easy, and I don't think while multinational businesses will come, they come and grasp this complexity so easily. Neither does the public relations industry grasp. Most of them stay limited to Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. But that is not where India is. The India that is growing, the India that is the big market potential, is outside these markets. The third thing that is the media complexity of the country. I mean, we have some 65,000 registered newspapers. Of course, only a few thousand are important and relevant. 750 television news channels. And everybody's an activist there. Now, the government is activist, the regulators are activist, consumers are activist, as if it's a society full of activists, but that's having a profound change in the way India has behaved in the past. We genuinely believe that the amount of scrutiny on corruption that's happening, India should be a much better place in the years to come. And the government only day before yesterday announced that we wish to come into the top 50 countries in ease of doing business within 2 years. If these intents are followed up with action, I think it will be a very nice thing. The internal challenges multinationals face are, I mean, they come with this assumption, oh, I am from America, so I am God, and therefore whatever I have done that has succeeded anywhere in the Western world will automatically succeed in an extended geography like India. It doesn't happen that way. It's a very, very complicated market. It is not one homogeneous market, and one mistake that marketeers make or businesses make is to segment that market by demographics. It's, I mean, two people in the same economic or educational background can behave completely differently in two different parts of the country. And therefore, you can't make these set assumptions or notions. So transplanted strategies would not work. And if really somebody has to design a strategy, it has to be specific to India. And I think the previous panel or the panel before that mentioned frugal innovation. If you want to come and succeed in India, you have to deliver 70% of the value that you deliver from the product in the West at 30% of the price. So that is what frugal innovation would be. And these basically are some of the thoughts. To give you, I mean, I'll take 1 minute more, example of the PR industry itself to understand the complexity of India. We have all the multinational PR firms in India, virtually all the top 20 at least, in the Holmes report. And some of them, the largest ones have been there for 20, 25, 30 years, and they still don't have revenues of more than $4 million or $5 million. You know, it's a country of 1.25 billion people. Why doesn't a PR agency have a revenue, or why doesn't anybody make a profit of more than $1 million? These are the complexities. I mean, what is the size of the industry? It is just about the size of Wagner Edstrom in the US, or about the size of APCO. So these are the contradictions that you deal with in India.
Okay, thank you, Madan. And how about like Africa and Latin America? We are not talking about one country, we are talking about multi-country. So, Kate?
But really interesting that I think you almost took the words out of my mouth. And in fact, my comments are almost identical. And the complexities for us are, it's really about consistency of message of one brand and that brand's reputation, and then the relevance across the 20 markets in which we operate. Nigeria is a very different market to Tanzania in the east. South Africa, very different to Ghana. It just simply comes down to relevance. And there are ways of managing that, obviously, but to your point, is that the range of media and the channels that people are receiving and participating and contributing to in terms of information are diverse, they are wonderful, but they are challenging to manage. And we are a South African-based bank entering African markets, along with a lot of other South African corporates and multinationals. We're all facing the same challenges. Some companies are successful, some are not. Some have actually entered markets, retreated, tried to exit again, and have admitted defeat and left. And a recent case of that was Woolworths, South African brand retailer, a retail brand entering Nigeria. I won't say much more because we are running out of time, but the key theme that I think has been coming through in a lot of the presentations today is about being relevant to your audiences and understanding the local insight, whether that and whether that needs to be because of language or culture or media channels or media usage. You really have to get into the trenches, so to speak, of the countries in which you're operating. You cannot run a communication plan or strategy sitting behind your desk in Johannesburg. You have to be in those countries, working with your local practitioners and PR agencies.
Okay.
Well, in my case, to make it brief for the sake of brevity, and as a second point from my end to leave with you to take away from this session, is that the one-fits-all solutions do not work in Latin America at all. And yes, the languages that are spoken in Latin America are only two, as you all know well, is the Spanish and the Portuguese, but the complexity and the fragmentation of the region in terms of social structures and economic development, political leanings, and regional and sub-regional coalitions of countries is so diverse that if any one company believes that by sitting in Miami, for instance, or in any other regional hub, drafting one single strategy for the whole region I can bet you that you are basically betting your money on a horrible disaster across the region. So again, I invite you to know the small details of every single country, because this is where the difference really makes value for the operation of any large corporation across the continent.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the last area we'll share would be like some do's and don'ts. Most probably like China, in the past, you all know that paying the media to get the story published is quite common. But most probably you also heard that recently some journalists like chief editors were being arrested. In fact, also some major PR firm bosses are being arrested. So most probably now paying media become quite risky things to do in China. What are the other do's and don'ts? I know, Kate, you have one slide sharing that. Maybe we.
It was just simply that we have developed a matrix. I don't know if the slide will come up. That when you have these challenges, as we all three of us have spoken about, and this is a very busy slide, but we work on the principle of what is the impact of your communication and what is the sensitivity of it. And a very good example right now is the Ebola crisis. It is making news all over the world. We as an organization had to develop a response. It is of international concern, and therefore it is high impact and of high sensitivity. It means headquarters, or what we call center, takes ownership of the crafting of that message and the dissemination of it. It's one way to get around the complexities. But on the other hand, you also have to allow your network or the countries in which you're operating, is that there has to be some autonomy for them as well, because they are experts on their own region. So it's this fine balance between who's going to be in charge, who's going to implement the strategy, who's going to develop the strategy, who's going to talk in the tonality that's right or relevant for that market. That's just one solution that we have. Another one that we found is working very well for us is the upskilling of the journalism profession. PR and journalism, different sides of the same coin. We found that investing in that has had huge inroads and success for us as an organization, and that not only do we buy goodwill and foster good relationships with journalists across our 20 African markets, we're also contributing to the sustainability of the industry of media and reporting. And those are just two examples that we've implemented.
Thank you. Maybe Jorge, like 10 seconds, and then Madan has another 10 seconds.
One thing for you to watch out carefully coming out from Latin America. Latin American multinational companies, the so-called multi-Latinas, are becoming global players. So they will be in your markets, if they are not already, very soon. 3 examples. Grupo Lala, Mexico, is the region's biggest dairy product company and one of the top 10 public companies in the world. They're buying massively in the US and in Europe. Grupo Bimbo is the world's largest bakery, and again, they're massively buying in Canada, in the UK, in Portugal, in Spain, in Argentina. And thirdly, and I conclude with this, Cemex, top multi-Latina, and is the second largest cement producer in the world. So they're coming. They will be in your markets very soon. Be prepared, be ready to operate with them.
Thank you. And then, Madan, you have 10 seconds.
If you can compete in India, you can compete anywhere in the world.
Thank you.
So come to India and compete. The important thing is to be relevant, understand the needs of India, don't come and transplant what you have, and last but not the least, have the sensitivity and the sensibility to what the diversity needs and expects from you.
Okay, thank you. And also, I would like to thank all of you for staying until this last minute. And Paul, back to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Madan, thank you. Kate, thank you, Jorge.